This is lecture 4 in the class Elementary Greek, and we're continuing on in our study or acquisition of core ideas in order to better read the biblical text and to understand Scripture, ultimately because we want to serve God with these truths. Chapter 4 is a nice breather chapter. It's an opportunity to step back and rest a little. And that's because chapter 4 is going to just set us up for the concepts of verb grammar. Okay, in chapter 5, we'll actually learn the verb grammar. We'll learn how it works. That's where we'll memorize a chart or two. But in chapter 4, we're just trying to get the concepts. We're trying to learn how verbs work. One of the fun things about learning Greek verbs is that in the process, you end up learning a lot about English verbs. You'll get stronger in your English grammar while you're working through your Greek grammar. Okay, and what you discover is that English verbs and Greek verbs have a similar set of parameters, different ways that verbs can be configured as we put them into their different forms with different meaning intents. So I'll start off by just going down through the 5 main attributes that we want to talk about verbs, and I'll give you a little bit of description for each one. The first that ought to be fairly recognizable would be number. And I start off with number because I think we already know it. We know it from when we worked on the nouns. The options on number would be what we saw already with nouns, singular versus plural. Okay, and so a given verb will come in both of these options. You'll be able to configure it so that either the goose walked across the street or the geese walked across the street. Now, my example there is kind of interesting because in both of those cases, the goose walked across the street and the geese walked across the street. They're the same. Walked, walked. If I say something like, let's put it in the present tense, the goose walks across the street. The goose walks. The singular subject, goose, controlled a singular verb, walks. Let's switch it up to a plural. The geese walk. I've got a handful of places in English where the singular will be distinct from the plural in the verb, not just the noun. Okay, that's what we're recognizing. Not only do the nouns have number, but oftentimes the verbs have number. Okay? In other cases in English, they'll be the same. And you just have to work through verb by verb to see how they are distinct. But to complete that chart out, and I'll show you a chart that puts both of these together in a moment, the second configuration would be person. And with person, we're talking about first, second, versus third person. Okay, if I put that into the most intuitive way to grasp it, in English, I would just do this chart. Okay, I've got at the top singular versus plural. Everything here, this column singular, this column plural. And I've got my pronouns working across, and this will help you distinguish now the first from the second and third persons. Let's just start here with this first person singular. Okay, first person singular would be I, and I want to distinguish so you can see how this works with the number. If it's singular as I, in the plural it's going to be we. So I versus we. If you analyze out how, I mean that's grammar, but how this works out itself out into the real world. If I am speaking alone, then of course I'm using this. And in the grammar of the sentence, I am the actor. I, the speaker, am also the actor, but it's just me, singular. Once someone else joins me and now the both of us speak together, I mean, I might be the representative voice for both of us, but now we've turned it into a we. I want to analyze this further because I think philosophically it can kind of be helpful to distinguish first, second, third person and how they work. What we're talking about with all of these, we're talking about the verb and its relationship to the subject. Okay, and so we'll say like Joel ate cheese. Okay, if that's my meaning, Joel ate cheese. There are 3 different ways that this could be configured. It could be configured as me saying, I ate cheese. What's happening there? What that's telling you is the actor, like if the verb was eating, then the one who did the eating, the actor of the eating, who ate the cheese. You basically put in your verb eating and put a who in front of it. If that actor, the who question, is also the same as the present speaker, who is the one who is making this whole utterance? Who's the one reciting the sentence? From whose mouth does it come? If the person speaking the sentence is also the actor of the sentence, I'll use I. I ate cheese, right? I'm speaking this sentence. And what is the meaning of the sentence? Well, the actor in that sentence is Joel. I am Joel. So I'll use the first person. Okay, that's going to be distinct from the next, which is the second person. And in the case of the second person, I'm going to get the difference being that it's someone else speaking into the equation. They're speaking to the one who did the action of the verb. Okay, so this is the significance of this. I've got two different things going on, and how those two things relate will describe or control my person. There is who is speaking, and there is who is doing the action. If the action of the verb is eating cheese, there's somebody else who's speaking this utterance. If those two are the same, we'll go with first person. I ate the cheese. Yeah, but maybe Bob enters the equation. Bob looks at me, and Bob utters this statement. Now, the meaning of the statement is Joel ate the cheese. That's the meaning of it. But Bob looks at me, and since I'm Joel, Bob, an additional speaker outside, says, you ate the cheese. And when I have that configuration, I have another person outside making the statement, but the actor of the sentence is the one actually, the actor of the sentence is the one they are speaking to, the addressee. Then we'll go with second person. Okay. Now, all of that explanation, I think it's interesting, and I think it kind of can help you grasp what we mean by second person. Truth be known, if you just memorized I, you, he, you'll get there. So you don't even need exactly to comprehend the discussion I just made about the way these work. I do think it's interesting. But for now, if you want to just memorize this chart, first person I, second person you, third person he, that'll do for me. Let me go to the third person though. And the third person is the he, she, it, him, her configuration. That's all English. I don't need you to memorize all these. If you wanted to keep it simple, you could just do I, we, you, y'all, he, they. That would do fine. And in this case, the situation is that Bob and I are now sitting over and I ate the cheese. So Fred comes in and starts having a conversation with Bob about me. This is the case where the speaker, the one uttering the statement, and the hearer, the one who receives the statement, both of those guys, Bob and Fred, are distinct from the one who acted in the sentence. Because Joel ate the cheese. Bob and Fred are talking about Joel. When that kind of configuration happens, we would call it a third person. He, she, it. And over on the plural side, they, them. You'll notice that in English, we don't have a way to distinguish the second person singular and plural. In English, we normally just say you. So you ate the cheese, meaning just Joel ate the cheese. Or you ate the cheese, meaning Joel and Sarah ate the cheese. You guys, you ate the cheese. So I've actually distinguished here, and I've said y'all. You can do you guys, you'ns, yous. There are all these different solutions for how English speakers will communicate when needed to say the second person plural. Okay, but basics of this is that you need to know how this chart works. If you've done language work before, you may have seen this chart. This basic structure, singular, plural, first person, second, and third. Okay, when that comes then into Greek, what we've just gotten now is our second parameter. We have singular, plural, first, second, and third. If this one right here, number, gives me 2 options, this right here gives me 3. And so multiplying those out, I can end up with 6 different options. Okay, my third parameter will be tense. You're accustomed to tense as well. In English, we hear the labels present, future, and so on. I don't need you to memorize the different tenses for now, but the one we're going to learn in lesson 5 will be present. And the next one that we'll learn in lesson 6 will be the imperfect. Okay, those will be your core ones to memorize for the near term. Present and imperfect tenses, the other ones are going to be future, aorist, and perfect. There's also a pluperfect, which we don't really do much with. What I think does matter for your purposes with thinking about tense is that I think there is a little bit more analysis we could make, and that's recognizing that there are actually two different kinds of ideas that we wrap up together when we refer to something and call it tense. There are actually two different things going on there. And the two things we're talking about, I'll represent with this diagram. They are time and aspect. Okay, you're more familiar with this than you realize. We might say a present tense. Okay, but present tense means something's happening in the present, transparent enough. But let's recognize that I can say, I eat, that's present tense. I am eating, that's also present tense. And it really does raise this kind of conundrum. If I eat and I am eating are both present tense, what's the difference? What you're actually dealing with in that case is that in time, both of those are present. But in aspect, I've changed from a simple to a linear. A simple aspect, I eat. A linear, I am eating. English grammarians like to call this the present progressive versus the present. But you just recognize that I might have a tense that would configure or that would combine present with this, or another tense that might combine something else in English. And what we're going to do in our discussion of Greek is we're going to recognize that for each tense we learn, there is both time and aspect. There is both a time component, when did it happen, and an aspect component, how did it happen. For now, I'm just going to show you one particular tense. In the future, I'll show you the whole picture. But let's take the present tense. And if you hear in the present tense, I am eating cheese. The am eating, I hear am, that tells me when it happened. And so that would be present time. But the ing bit, the fact that I have an ing in there, you can hear that it's kind of ongoing. We would call that linear aspect. And that's one of three possibilities for aspect. Okay, so maybe I should have given this to you as a chart, but let's try it this way. We'll go ahead and create a chart. Here we are. I have three options for time: past, present, future. I think that makes sense. I mean, that's almost philosophical. What might not be as obvious would be three possible aspects or three possible ways that a verb happens. And the simple aspect is just, think of it kind of like I just dropped it in there. Just, I stated it. Simple. I ate. I eat. Okay, what I've found helpful with students is just, there is no ing. It's just the statement, I ate. I eat. There is no ing. We often represent that, and I do find this helpful, with a symbol, just a little dot. The linear aspect, we often represent with a line, and I think what helps students is the ing. There's going to be, generally, an ing in here. Okay, I was eating, I am eating, I will be eating. Get an ing in there, and you're probably now looking at linear. Okay, and the last, I've called perfect, or perhaps for clarity, and so that there's not confusion, we'll call this completed aspect. If you look at Plummer, this is one place where I go a little different from him. I do simple, linear, and completed. Plummer will do the same. He would call this imperfective. He would call this perfective. And he would call this stative. Okay, those are fine labels. I just find students are a little confused because the perfect is actually, the perfective tense is actually not the perfect tense. The perfective aspect is not the perfect tense. So I kind of prefer simple, linear versus completed, those three. And once I do that, then the completed is going to be have, has, had. Just look for some form of the have word, and you're probably looking at completed. Okay, and so I could say I had eaten, I have eaten, I will have eaten. And I think the helpful thing here is that I can actually put this now into a matrix where I can have all three of these together: the time, past, present, future; the aspect, simple, linear, completed. And you can do all of the combinations. Okay, I would encourage you to take a second here and pause the video, look down this and see how the simple aspect runs across each of the three times, past, present, and future. How you can do the linear or the ing form, how you can do the completed, the have form, and make each one of those work with the past, present, and the future. Okay, so what I'm recognizing for our starters and our first tense that we're going to learn next time we're together is that the present tense combines, and it always and only combines, a present time, you can see that here, present time with linear aspect. And a present tense in Greek will always and only be an am, I am, he is, you are, but a present time with an ing. Work at the habit of getting an ing when you translate the present tense. The next one we're going to learn works somewhat similarly, and this maybe is helpful as a contrast. The imperfect combines a linear aspect, so you're also going to have an ing for this. And the difference between the present and the imperfect is it's past time with linear aspect. I was eating cheese. Okay, and so I could do this with each of the verbs. Here are the 5 verb tenses, and you can just take a look down them for practice or out of interest. You can see each one of these has a particular combination of time and aspect. So the present tense is the only one that has present time. It has a linear aspect. The future, of course, has future time. It's hard to say with future what the aspect is, but for now we'll call it a simple aspect. And then the other 3 tenses that we're going to learn, imperfect, aorist, and perfect, are all past time. So once you recognize that they're all past time, well then the only distinction between them must be the aspect. And that's true. Linear, simple, and completed aspect is what distinguishes these 3. Okay, so my discussion here about aspect is to say there's actually not a way to give me a present time simple aspect. It doesn't exist. There are workarounds if you want to do it without verbs. But present time simple aspect, that's not the way that the tense works. Future, you really just have future time. The aspect's not really in view. The key here, the distinction is going to tend to go with the imperfect, aorist, and perfect, all of these being past. Here's a way where I can distinguish out the 3 different aspects. And knowing some of that difference will help me as I try to see the significance of specific verbs and how they work. Okay, I'm going to give you the last 2 parameters for our verbs. So I've given you tense, and you can have a total of 5 tenses. I'm just, for now, mentioning present and imperfect. But if I'm multiplying that out now, I'm up to 30 different configurations. I have another that's important for you to know and understand how it works, and that is voice. And voice gives me the options of active, middle, or passive. This is, again, a thing that we do, at least with the active and the passive in English. And the way that we would work this is if I have an expression like I eat, or I'll do past, I ate the cheese. Okay, don't change out the subjects. Let's just bring it straight down. I, and we'll put over here the cheese. This would be an active voice verb. But what if I change it out and instead I say I was eaten by the cheese? Okay, our differences in the verbs, I ate the cheese, and on the other case, I was eaten by the cheese. I've not changed my configuration of subject or object, right? It's still that one. The cheese, it's still that one. Nothing's changed there. Okay, so the ate is the verb in both cases. Ate, was eaten. The difference between these is in the one case I have it as active. In the other case I have it as passive. An active verb, I ate. A passive verb, I was eaten. And the way this works, if you're kind of trying to derive this off philosophically, in this case, the actor of the verb, this actor, the one who actually doing the action, I, is the same as the subject. The subject is eating the cheese. Okay. In this second case, the passive voice, in the case of the passive voice, it's actually another entity that's doing the acting. Even though grammatically this is the subject, and so if I ask the subject, or I state the verb, was eaten, I ask the question, who, I'll get the subject. I was eaten. But in the world, in the real world, semantically, the one doing the action is actually the cheese. Okay, and so if I have the situation where we'll do subject, verb, object. Okay, I'm going to kind of make this simple. I'll say subject acted upon the verb. It goes that way. That would be active. If I flip it though, and I go subject, verb, and it goes the other way, the verb was done to the subject, we would call that passive. Passive is when the verb is done to the subject. All right, what makes this interesting or helpful as a diagram is that I have a third option in Greek, and it doesn't exist like this in English. It's the example of the middle. And in the middle, it's kind of like the subject is doing the action of the verb, more or less somewhat to himself. Okay, if you wanted to be ludicrous, you can say something like, the cheese is eating itself. More realistic examples would be something like, I shaved this morning. Well, who or what did you shave? Oh, I shaved myself. Okay, the actor, the subject, is performing the action of the verb onto himself. And you can read Plummer. Plummer will nuance this quite a bit, and it's a really helpful discussion. We recognize that when you have a middle voice, it's not always a hard emphasis on the acting upon itself. But the idea at least is in there, related. It can be muted, it can be magnified depending on the verb. It's a really complex subject. You do have to end up getting into a lot of detail to work with it. For now, what you can just do with the middle voice is understand or interpret, render, in a lot of the cases at least, you're going to render it, I did it for myself or to myself. Okay, do it that way. God acted for himself. God did this action for or to himself. And as we continue to work, I'll introduce to you verbs that actually mute the case of the emphasis of the middle so that it's not a strong idea. There's more discussion to be had about the middle and how strong the middle's coming through. But this basic idea is there, that the case of the middle stands somewhat, if you want to say, between the active and the passive, instead of it acting upon the object or it happening to the subject. The middle is kind of this reciprocal. Okay, that was voice. And then the last one I need to talk with you about is called mood. I won't go into a lot of detail with mood, but the idea of mood is the relationship of the verb with reality, kind of how real it is. So if you hear this in English verbs, something like I eat, okay, that would be called indicative, the relationship with reality as well. You're just indicating a fact, I eat. But if I want to change the kind of degree of reality, like move it on the scale from things that are just real, like death and taxes, over to the opposite end of the scale to things like unicorns and utopias. And I'm moving it across that scale, okay, so now it's less and less real as I move across. I could do something like, instead of I eat, I should eat. I might eat. Could I eat? I hope that you would be able to eat. I'm moving across different degrees of reality. And if I put all that together, you'll learn these quite a bit later. This is really a second semester discussion, so it's way out in the future. All you're worried about right now is just this first one, the indicative. Everything you're learning now is indicative. But in the case of mood then, there are these options. Here's your full chart of all the parameters I might see in a Greek verb, all the parameters that you want to be familiar with in a Greek verb. And for the purposes of this lesson, really, you just want to have worked through what I described here, kind of enough that you understand the concepts. Because as we keep on going, we will work through and actually learn these verbs individually, and I'll explain in each case what they mean and how they work. I do need you to memorize one thing, and that is I'm going to introduce one of the key verbs in every language, actually, but in Greek, it's the form eimi, which means is. Okay, so here's a chart, and you just have to brute force memorize it. The way I recommend you memorize it is exactly what I've done with others. Walk through and just say it a million times. Okay, so eimi e esten esti as men esta ac. Eimi e este as men esta ac. You see this, I've got a parentheses around, it's called a movable nu. Sometimes you're going to see AC, sometimes you're going to see acen, and it's just a matter of preference, what the author was doing. Almost think of it like an accent or a dialect. So if you see the acen with the nu there, don't be surprised. Similarly, I probably should have included, you'll have also possibly a movable nu in this spot. So I might have esten, movable nu. And if you encounter those, don't let it throw you off. But this is a form that you just need to memorize, and it means is. Okay, let's practice. If I'm running through them, this is the first person singular, and so this is going to be I am. Second person, you are. Third person, he, she, it is. First person plural, we are. Second person plural, you are, or y'all are, you guys are. And third person plural, they are. Okay, memorize those forms, and you've already now gotten the basic kind of structure of the grammar. Little encouragement here. Don't expect that you have to remember or understand everything I've just talked through. It'll come back again and again. You'll have lots of chances. If there are pieces there that weren't immediately clear to you, no worries. We'll get to it. We'll hit some of those as we continue on. I'm just going to show you one example where I do think this aspect discussion has some exegetical significance. There are many others, but I have a preference for 1 John, since 1 John is the book we'll work at translating at the end of second semester. And there's an interesting case here in 1 John. John is writing here, everyone doing sin is also doing righteousness. Sin is lawlessness. Keep on going, verse 6. Everyone remaining in him is not sinning. Everyone sinning has not seen him or known him. Okay, what I think is significant here is you could look at this and be a little bit troubled. Everyone who remains or is remaining in him is not sinning. Or if you translated it just as a simple present, does not sin. That doesn't sound right. I sin. What does that mean then? I mean, am I not remaining in Christ? The ESV has rendered the aspect. Remember, aspect is that linear, ongoing idea. I said get an ing in there. The ESV has rendered that with this comment in here, keeps on sinning. Where did they get the keeps on? And this keeps on here again. Where did they get that? Up above, the first section I read, everyone who is making a practice of sin, they rendered it. Makes a practice. Well, actually, the Greek just said everyone doing sin. It's just a simple word, doing. Okay, so how do we get up to the idea of makes a practice? And the answer goes, they derived it again from this present tense. They look at the present tense, they see the linear, ongoing, continuous kind of action. And that linear action drives their choice to make this the translation practice, an ongoing representative characteristic. Okay, I do think in cases like this, grasping the aspect helps make sense of why the translation did what it did. And it makes sense also of something significant going on in the text that you want to know and you want to be able to handle appropriately. When we continue on in our next lecture, I will introduce the present tense. And at the end of that lecture, you actually now have the basic tools to put together a Greek sentence. You have nouns, you have verbs, you have the Legos, you could actually construct a sentence from those pieces.